Nobody in my family had ever graduated from college. None of us had ever thought about a Mitchell being a judge. When I was getting ready to graduate from high school, I had decided that I couldn't go to college. And I remember receiving a phone call from some counselor at Jarvis Christian College, and the call was, we heard you a good student, but you want to try out college, you want to go? And I remember saying to the lady, well, I just accepted a job at bagging groceries. I'm pretty good at it. The manager said I could be an assistant manager in 6 months, so that's looking pretty promising. And I'll never forget what she said. It seemed to make sense to an 18-year-old. She said, well, why don't you come give college a try? If it don't work out, you can always go back to bagging groceries. When I got to school, I really began to struggle in English and literature class. I always struggled with reading. Now I realize how I was functionally literate and felt like I just needed to go back to bagging groceries. And I remember running into Miss Daisy Wilson and Miss Margaret Bell, and both of them kind of pulled me to the side and said, Everett, you're a diamond in the rough, and we don't want to see you give up on your dream of a college education, so we're going to teach you how to study. Within that time frame of failing classes, I went from failing classes to making 4.0s while I was at Jarvis, because they taught me how to study. And that discipline of going every day from 5 to 10, 5 to 10, that kind of laid the foundation for eventually, getting a chance to go to Morehouse, and then eventually making it to Princeton as well. My ex-wife got a full ride at UW to do a doctoral stuff. So we get here, I had trouble finding a job. It was so difficult because I'm thinking I got a degree from Morehouse, 2 from Princeton, surely I should be able to find a job. It got so bad that I was delivering pizzas for Pizza Hut. One night, an alumnus introduced me to Mary Kay Baum, who at that time was the executive director of Madison Area Urban Ministry. I meet her and we hit it off, and she's like, I want you to come work for me and we can do some prisoner reentry restorative justice programs. That's what really started my journey toward UW. Even though I'd never thought about law school, it was just working with Mary Kay, who was a lawyer. To me, she became my first mentor around the legal issues and how you can bring that passion to bear for people who can't fight for themselves. I thought about being a lawyer. I just decided, well, I can't afford to take none of these classes, so I just picked up an LSAT book, made an appointment with the admissions counselor here at UW, and I just started working. I had a tragedy where my sister-in-law, Morgan, was killed by a drunk driver during her senior year. And that tragedy of her being killed really sent our family to a place of chaos. So we ended up in divorce, found myself homeless. I only had $37 in my checking account, and I still had this 2-year-old baby. I barely knew how to be a father because I didn't have one myself, and I definitely wasn't around my own, so it was kind of scary to be a father, and especially if I was going to be by myself raising this baby. I gotten this letter from UW, so I'm so excited to receive this acceptance letter to law school. And I held on to that letter, and that letter became, the foundation for me because, when I took that letter to UW Housing, and I asked them for one of probably my biggest favor I'd ever asked anyone.
This is my acceptance letter. I was advised actually to come down here to speak with you. I'm in the need for a little bit of assistance. I'm homeless right now. Anything that can be done at all would be a great help.
So housing is your need, and we've come to the right place.
Yes, ma'am.
We could do something. We're gonna find you something.
You can find something like...
A place for you to live.
Would I have to pay that, or...
You will pay when you can. You deserve to be here. You've gotten in. We're gonna make this happen. For you and your daughter.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All my little stuff that I had in storage in other places, I just took it and put it into our little 2-bedroom place. that Sydney and I had for ourselves, and bought her a little bed, and tried to bring some normalcy around her life again. That's when I met Monka, my wife now, and she became my study partner. And so she used to really help me, kind of orally explain, what was going on with cases and case law. When I started at the Dane County District Attorney's Office as an assistant district attorney, I really enjoyed being a prosecutor because it really did give you the power to decide what to charge, what not to charge, to protect victims of people who had been abused. Eventually, I left the DA's office and came back to UW to work for the chancellor as a director of community relations. I kept my law license active, and rather than charging people, I just started doing pro bono cases. I started to realize that there was no African American in a judicial role here in Dane County. I remember people saying, well, you don't have enough experience, you're too young, your people don't vote, there's not really a real possibility for you to win. To get the final tally that I was elected here in Dane County was amazing. And I know most of that would have never happened if I hadn't been at UW to get my law degree. And I'm hoping that, through my life, they see one example of many examples, Black, white, Latino, all kinds of different tapestries of people who move through life in very traumatic ways, but are able to harness that spirit of energy because they're pulling it from people who see them when they can't see themselves. There are individuals that are running around us, living around us, that are diamonds in the rough. It's up to us to see them for who they are, or most importantly, see them for what they can become. I'm grateful for places like UW because they didn't have to accept me into law school. They didn't have to, give me that opportunity to lead the university as director of community relations for a number of years. But they did, and in turn, that investment has given me the ability to return back to this community. And I'm not an exception. I'm the standard of what human beings can become. When you hear somebody say to you, you can overcome this.